Let's take a look at a case that occurred in Harrisburg. This is case number 60207. And if you're a MUFON member, you can go to our website and you can actually look up this case and see the details. Case number 60207 occurred August 25th of 2014 in Harrisburg. What they see is this object about a mile in the sky. It's about 300 feet in size. It's disc-shaped, no sound, and it's hovering for an hour. They contact the Fort Indian Gap military base, and they say they have nothing on radar with this. So this case actually was on Good Morning America. The video from it was shown on Good Morning America, and also the Nightly News and the Harrisburg News showed the video. And it looks like your classic orbs that are being seen in the sky. Now what happens is that was the sighting on Monday. They saw blue and red orbs. They separated, they reformed, and then they shot straight up into the sky. Then what happened on Friday of the same week, it happens again. And this is the one that was there for an hour. And they call the police. So the witness says on the second time, I'm calling the police. 3 policemen show up. They're there for 45 minutes looking up, and the one officer said, that's a UFO. They had no idea what it was. They called it into the police station. On that instance, it was lowered to the ground. They could actually see portholes. So what are these objects? And these are the type of investigations we get. These are the ones we live for in MUFON, the real good cases that are really unexplained, and that's when we go to work with radar, etc. So that's a local case from Harrisburg, just occurred in August. Fred, Sam, tell us about another case that occurred closer to home.
Well, last year, we received 2 cases at one time, the same family. The first case we investigated, the gentleman reported he was an abductee, all right? He was taken to the Aleutian Islands underwater, and there were some explosions. He said there was actually us exploding things under the water, whatever.
Was he physically taken to the
Aleutian? Mentally.
Oh, mentally.
Okay. And he continued for a while. And then it was his sister and her boyfriend.
They delivered auto parts, and when you buy auto parts and you need something the following day, there are people who go throughout Western Pennsylvania and deliver those auto parts, right, specialty parts. Mm-hmm. And they had 2 deliveries. They had a delivery in Franklin, Pennsylvania, and they had another delivery in Erie, Pennsylvania. So they drove to Franklin and made their delivery, and they headed northwest towards Erie, Pennsylvania. And while they were driving northwest toward Erie, Pennsylvania along a 2-lane road, they saw a gray creature walk across the road in front of them, in front of their vehicle, walk up a hillside, pause before it went into the woods, and looked over its right shoulder at them as they were driving by.
And described it as an Ethiopian.
The reason that case caught our attention, Fred and I both drove to Erie to investigate a similar case, John.
Okay.
There was a sighting in Girard, Pennsylvania. There was a gentleman driving back toward Erie, Pennsylvania from Girard in a northeast direction along the main road right there. And he saw some lights off to his right, to the southern part of the road, south of the road. So he pulls into a parking lot. We later learned the parking lot was a veterinary hospital. And he gets out of his vehicle, and he has one arm on his, opens the door, one arm on the door, the other arm on the top of his pickup truck, and he sees 2 grays walk across the parking lot toward where the lights were that he was witnessing. He became frightened, immediately frightened. He jumped into his vehicle, backed out of there, threw some gravel, and headed on back down the road, heading toward Erie, Pennsylvania. Fred and I drove up, and we wanted to witness the site and see if there was anything of interest there. So we drove to this, what we learned was a veterinary hospital. Mm-hmm. The veterinarian came out and wanted to talk with us. And both Fred and I were kind of pleasantly surprised. He was not surprised to see us. It was almost like he did not expect us, but he was not surprised to see us. And one thing that we found to be of significance in this sighting was that he brought to our attention there was a geodetic marker located on his property in front of his building.
What does that mean?
I have no idea. I have no idea. Fred and I tried to find out the origin of geodetic markers. There's a government agency that controls them.
Okay.
And they're used in identifying locations, altitudes. Apparently they're used by the Navy to identify where their ships are on the face of the planet at all times. So that I found to be of interest.
But this isn't in the ocean. This is in Erie.
And also, what actually got our attention too was there was actually the grays that he's talking about. They look like Ethiopians too, real skinny and tall and skinny, but they had white belts on.
Were they gray or dark skinned?
Gray.
They were grays. Okay.
Yeah.
Did they describe them as your typical 3.5, 4 foot gray?
No, he said there's a little bit bigger than that.
Okay.
But they was actually real skinny. He said because you know how like the Ethiopians never they always show them.
Right.
So that's another thing that got our attention because we had the case here with the Ethiopians looking thing, and over here we got 2 of them. But what also with the belts on, how they came across the road. Another thing with the doctor, I mean, we walk in, you can imagine walking into some place where you know nobody, you got people sitting there and you say, we're UFO investigators, can we go back in your woods? Normally people would look at you like, really, As soon as we said that, I mean, it was like I thought they were going to go buy cake and coffee for us. I mean,
did the veterinarian give you any additional information since he's not surprised that you're there?
Right. He said that one of the people in his office, one of the girls in there, has been an abductee. She has been abducted numerous times.
Okay. And this is typical of cases where we find more information.
Right.
The more questions you ask, the better answers you get.
Right.
Well, there was another interesting aspect to the case. When Fred and I went into the woods behind the veterinary hospital, it was a nice thicket, a lot of trees, a lot of oak trees, but there was one Pennsylvania white pine tree. And the Pennsylvania white pine tree was cut off at an angle at about 4.5 feet above the ground. So it was just about right here. I could look at it. And one of the things that I wanted to see was the growth rings. I wanted to see if there was anything particular about the growth rings. And the reason that I wanted to see that is it goes back to the Travis Walton case. If you recall, when Travis Walton was abducted in Arizona, the lumber company went back and they learned that there was exceptional growth in the periphery of that clearing where he was abducted from. Yet if you go 10 or 15 feet off the periphery of the clearing into the woods, there was not accelerated growth in the trees. So when I walked in there and I saw that tree cut off at an angle, took a picture of it, looked at it carefully, and we just wanted to see what the heck was going on in there.
Okay, so this is typical of some of the cases that we get in the Pennsylvania area. Let's switch gears now. A lot of times when I talk to people or give lectures, I say to them, what would it take to convince you that this is real? So what I want to do right now is I want to show you a video of what President John F. Kennedy said in 1961. This is one of the most powerful videos I've ever heard, and you have to wonder, what was he into? What did he know? What was he briefed on? And let's take a look at that video right now.
President John F. Kennedy.
Ladies and gentlemen, the very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society, and we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. We decided long ago that the dangers of excessive and unwarranted concealment of pertinent facts far outweighed the dangers which are cited to justify it. Even today, there is little value in opposing the threat of a closed society by imitating its arbitrary restrictions. Even today, there is little value in ensuring the survival of our nation if our traditions do not survive with it. And there is very grave danger that an announced need for increased security will be seized upon by those anxious to expand its meaning to the very limits of official censorship and concealment. That I do not intend to permit to the extent that it's in my control. And no official of my administration, whether his rank is high or low, civilian or military, should interpret my words here tonight as an excuse to censor the news, to stifle dissent, to cover up our mistakes, or to withhold from the press and the public the facts they deserve to know. For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised. 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 Its dissenters are silenced, not praised.
I love listening to this video. This is one of the most powerful speeches that I've ever heard. Now you got to figure it's 1961. That's 53 years ago. What was Kennedy briefed on? He's the new president, right? What was he into? What was he finding out?
I don't think he was really briefed on it. I think he found out about UFOs through other actions.
Well, there's a briefing that all presidents get.
Well, the briefing that most presidents get today is shut up and do what we tell you to do.
Yeah.
I don't think
But they come into office thinking, I'm going to do all this stuff.
Right.
Then they get the briefing. Let me tell you how it really works.
Right. I think maybe Kennedy was told something about UFOs, but I think the big thing with UFOs and Kennedy and the secrecy was when Russia and the United States almost went to war over UFOs.
Well, that's a good point, because one of the things that Kennedy did 10 days before his assassination, he contacted Khrushchev, and he was concerned about a UFO being misidentified as a missile and starting World War III. He also told the CIA, I want all the UFO files on my desk for February of 1964. 10 days later, in November of 63, he's assassinated. But this video talks about a lot. Talks about terrorism, homeland security, the freedom of the press. You know, these politicians don't want to be questioned on anything, so they cover stuff up. But the end of the video is really what we want to talk about, because there has been an extremely high rate of ufologists, people that investigate UFOs, or even people that are whistleblowers that come out and tell the truth. There's a high incidence of death by suicide from people who family members say are not suicidal, death by fast-acting cancers, etc. So there were some pictures there shown, and let me run through a couple of those people that are well known. Pope John Paul I, right? He's in office 30 days as the Pope, not in office, but he says he's going to audit the books, he's going into the finances. 30 days later, he's poisoned, he dies, and he has a doctor that's on staff all the time. He's off that night. Doctor and nurse is off that night. He also has a button next to his bed that he presses, and then out in the hallway, a light flashes. That light was on all night. Nobody came to the aid of John Paul. You saw the picture of Martin Luther King, JFK, RFK. Let's talk about some of the ufologists that died.
Well, one would be Congressman Schiff.
Schiff, where was he? Nevada? Arizona?
Roswell.
Nevada. New Mexico.
New Mexico, right. He, when they started getting on the Roswell case, he went to government accounting office and this and that, Navy, Army, CIA. He wants all this information. He was a healthy man. 6 or 7 months later, he died from cancer. And they attribute it to what he was doing. I think that's telling the other congressmen that this is what's going to happen to you.
Yeah.
You know, you keep it up. I think they're all told that keep their nose where it's supposed to be and don't stick it anywhere, because if you do, you're done.
Well, I remember just a couple of years ago, Governor Richardson of New Mexico,
Right.
same as Congressman Schiff,
Right.
he came out and wanted the Roswell files.
Right.
Right, and he was very adamant about it, wanted to know what happened to Roswell in his state. About 6 weeks later, he gets back on TV and he has a complete reversal.
Right.
And he says, well, you know, it's a tourist destination. I just wanted to drum up tourism.
Right.
And that's the last you heard from him. He was also present during the Rockefeller meeting at Rockefeller's ranch that had Hillary and Bill Clinton.
Right.
It was Governor Richardson. A lot of those inside people were there for that UFO discussion. Mac, he's a Harvard psychiatrist, right? He's at Harvard, and he starts. And the way he got into this, the Air Force asked him they wanted him to sit down as a psychiatrist and talk to servicemen and policemen who have seen and encountered UFOs or have been abducted.
Right.
That's how he got into it, and he got hooked. Once he did his hypnosis, his interviews, he got hooked, and he started writing books on UFOs, and he became the abduction researcher. And Harvard tried to take his tenure away. They tried to kick him out. He had to get, Daniel Sheehan represented him to fight Harvard, and they didn't do anything to him. But what happens to him years later? The #1 leading psychiatrist in this field, he's in London, he gets hit by a car. And it's because cars are on the opposite side of the street, convenient, gets hit.
But there's a lot of speculation about that too. A lot of people actually say it was a different Mac that got hit by the car.
Oh, I didn't hear that.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, there was some speculation back when it happened.
Then you have Murphy.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about this case with Stan Gordon when we talk about Kecksburg. But Murphy from the Tribune Review in Greensburg, he's there, he's on the scene, he's got pictures. The military comes in, takes his camera, but he's still going to write a story. He gets visited by 2 men in black. They go over what he's going to say. They take his script. You're not going to say this. Let me give you your new script. They give him the new script, totally edited, totally different. And the staff there at the Trib, they said, his wife, they said for a long time, he was like depressed over this. This was the case you wait for as a reporter.
Case of a lifetime.
Yeah, case of a lifetime. So what happens to him? He goes along with their script. A couple of years later, California, hit by a car. I love the history of this UFOs. When you go back to the 50s with Project Blue Book, let me tell you about a guy. The first director of Project Blue Book, 1952, Captain Ruppelt. Okay? Now think about this. Here's the guy that's investigating UFOs, right? He's giving information to NICAP and the other UFO organizations and the media, confidential records. He gave 51 documents to a guy, and he wrote a book. You know, so here's a guy that's running the Project Blue Book, but also he's pro UFO. He believes this is real, and when you read his book, it's really interesting. I read his book that he wrote in 1956, but he leaves Project Blue Book at 37 years old. He's a captain, and he wrote this book, The Report on UFOs. Great book. So now he's getting pressured. Actually, he was getting pressured to the point that he had a mild heart attack while he was running this group of Project Blue Book. He retires early at 37 years old.
Wow.
Actually, he was 34 years old. At 37, he rewrites the last 3 chapters of the book, adds 3 chapters. The last chapter completely debunks the whole book. His book was one of the best evidence books on UFOs. They got to him. He writes chapter 20 saying that...
did he write or did somebody else write it?
He put it in the book and republished it, and saying that air traffic controllers, pilots are the worst people for witnesses. I mean, it was totally ridiculous what he wrote. But get this, once the book is published, 6 months later, he dies. Wow. So you have Captain Ruppelt, again, another one suspiciously that passes away. What about...
Stanley Kubrick, same story.
Yeah, Kubrick supposedly was involved in the filming of the landing on the moon, that the first couple of landings were faked, that 13 was the first attempt, 11 and 12 never really landed.
Well, they
Same
say
thing.
actually Kubrick got killed because of eyes wide open.
Eyes wide shut.
Eyes wide
Eyes
shut.
wide shut.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Now we're talking
okay.
about, you know, a little bit of mind control stuff
Yeah.
there.
There were people who suggested that mind control caused the breakup of the marriage between Tom Cruise and Nicole
Right,
Kidman as
right.
a result of their having
Of that being in the movie?
participated in the movie.
Okay, but take this now. You have James Forrestal. So here's I think he was the first Secretary of Defense
Right,
under
right.
Truman, right?
Well, see, but
So-
I think with that, John, you got to look back. You got to go to allegedly the group that allegedly ran the UFOs. Okay, Majestic 12.
Right.
Okay, nobody had control over them. They did what they wanted to do, and you're looking at people that were part of Majestic 12.
Right.
So they killed whoever they wanted to kill, and nobody would say anything to them.
Well, Forrestal was one of the original
Right.
members of MJ-12.
Right.
Forrestal was a very accomplished guy, right? So this starts MJ-12 in 1952. Now, Ruppelt is running Blue Book. He has no idea that the CIA and MJ-12 is in existence. He even
Right.
says in his book, there's rumors of an intelligence agency
Right.
that's already out interviewing our witnesses before we get there. He had no idea this was
Right.
going on. So here you got Forrestal, a very accomplished guy. He gets involved with this Roswell thing. Supposedly they showed him the bodies,
Right.
the evidence. He wants to go public with it. He says, Bill of Rights, Constitution, the people have the right to know about this. It started to play on him to the point that he's taken and put in Bethesda Naval Hospital on the 16th floor. The staff there say, put him on the ground floor if he's suicidal. They put him on the 16th floor. His brother shows up after he's been in the hospital for whatever amount of time. He says, I'm checking him out tomorrow. That night, again, the doctors aren't on staff. There's this suicide attempt where he ties sheets to a radiator, just loosely tied, and jumps out the window, commits suicide. Yet, on the investigation, the sheet wasn't tied very well. There's scuff marks all over the windowsill. He wanted to go public with the Roswell information, and here's a guy that would have never been considered suicidal commits suicide.
But if you look at it, if somebody would actually be able to prove that there were UFOs out there, how would that change the world?
Well, that's the question.
Right, and this is the whole thing.
They
Right,
know something
right.
about this.
Yeah, and I mean, so you look at how many people, I mean, look at some of these people, the one guy that, I forget his name, but he was writing books on it. He went in to get a knee operation, and he died. You know, then another guy was in a restaurant eating with lunchtime with everybody, and he died from food poisoning. Nobody else died from food poisoning.
Well, here's the thing.
I think that if you find out something, they're going to take you out.
But this is what happened. In the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, the CIA was involved in this. There's absolutely no doubt. Matter of fact, we have the Leonard Stringfield files.
Right.
Case after case of a ufologist. MUFON had to go get the guy, get him out of Akron, bring him to Cleveland, bring him
Right.
to Pittsburgh. They had to get him out of it because he was being threatened. You know, we have those files, the
Right,
Stringfield files. So, but what I believe now is that the CIA was behind this. They debunked it. There's so much, the Robertson panel,
Right,
the
right.
TV shows, et cetera. They believe that this is 99.9% licked. Nobody believes in UFOs. It's a laughable type subject. But back in those days, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s,
Well-
these people were beaten up. They were gone
Yeah.
after. And if you cause too much trouble, but what is the truth? What is the horrible, horrible truth about UFOs and abductions that you could never tell the public? Now it's a joke because
Yeah.
of the way it's been handled.
Well, but see, they used back in the 50s too. Now, you know there was UFOs going around, so they used the U-2. They said that actually people were seeing that. When the U-2 first came out, it was
Misidentifications.
Yeah, and this is what they were saying. Oh, what they were seeing was our airplanes that nobody knew about. It's the same thing today. I mean, you got airplanes out there the military has. We have no idea what they are.
Yeah.
But I think people, when they start getting close to the truth, and it's like a lot of your abductees, they end up missing. You know, then you got the extraterrestrial exposure law.
Right.
Okay, that's another one. I mean, so where did this come in? Nobody even knew about it. It just happened to come into the law somewhere.
Well, that was a law,
Yeah,
federal law,
federal
that
law.
if you came in contact with a UFO,
Right.
anything extraterrestrial, and you didn't, like a hazmat material, don't touch it, leave the area, report it. If you touched it, like Travis Walton should have been in prison, you can get 5 years in jail, a $10,000 fine, and quarantine without a hearing
As long as they want to keep you.
for coming in contact.
So-
But they never prosecuted anybody.
No.
Because prosecution
Would open
it's
it up.
real.
Yeah.
Meant it's real.
See, I think what that was brought about because of all the abductions that were going on at that time.
Right.
They wanted to be able to take these people, and they found out we can't do it because there were too many of them going on.
Yeah. But I think nowadays, though, that stuff doesn't go on. I don't
Right.
think people get knocked off. I don't think they're being harassed. I've never been harassed. I've had, the only thing that's ever happened on some radio shows, the signal's brought down every single time, 5 times when I talked about the Yellowstone supervolcano.
Yeah.
But nowadays, it's kind of like we don't have to rough you up anymore. The Roswell people, they were threatened, right? The witnesses, they were told,
Well,
we can bury you in the desert and they'll never find you.
I tell you what,
Sum it up. You got the last word on
okay,
this.
a guy by the name of Moody, Robert Moody, allegedly killed 2 women out in Arizona back
Okay.
in the 1980 something, 1990. I was subpoenaed to go to his trial and testify about radio, hypnotic, intracranial control, and electronic dissolution of memory.
Okay, bottom line, we're out of
Okay,
the
well anyhow, I had the feds follow me for 3 or 4 days on
There you
that.
go. What year was that?
Back in 2000.
2000.
Down in Florida.
Okay.
They had a car, it had a Miami-Dade plate on it, and the police even told me, they said, that's not one of our plates. So they're still doing it out there.
Right.
And then he did his own trial, and I'm goofy.
All right.
So,
Good. That's our show for this week. Be sure to look for our next episode and visit MUFONPA.com for more information. If there's anything you've seen on this show that you want to ask me about, email me at jventuri1@comcast.net. Thank you.